guys, it's John Nelson, and you are listening to the Starting Block Podcast. This is a show for complete athletic development. Our mission here is to give you the tools to win, whether you're the athlete, the parent, or the coach. If you're new to our show, want to welcome you. Thanks for joining us. Let's go through our housekeeping and tell you a little bit how we operate. We're a little different than your standard podcast. We have multiple shows within our show. So the first episode you'll hear on a bi-weekly basis is going to be our Q&A. That's where myself, my co-host, Chris Scarborough. What's up, Chris?
Hey, good. Well, I don't know if it's morning or afternoon right now, but good morning.
Yeah. I hear you. It's kind of one of those days. So anyways, that's where Chris, we're clearly, we're on top of our game all the time. That's where Chris and I will take the questions that you guys submit to us. Chris, where can they submit those questions?
Info at startingblockpodcast.com.
Yep. So that's where you'll submit your questions. That can be anything related to training, performance, the rehab, nutrition, any theory, guests that we bring on, bring it to us. We'll take care of it there.
Yes.
So that's a bi-weekly episode. The other episode you'll hear bi-weekly is going to be our guest interview. So that's exactly what it sounds like. Our guest interview is just like every other podcast, ever. It's where we bring on our colleagues and we have a conversation. There'll be anything from doctors to therapists to coaches to kind of the neuro realm. I know it's kind of our forte a little bit, the neuro training stuff. We will have some repeat guests as well. We have some folks that have done episodes that have agreed to come on with us regularly. So you may hear some repeat guest interviews. And so we're pumped about that. And we got some really good ones coming up. I actually put up a post on my social last week just on our web, from a screenshot from our website about our guest list. And I'm going to tell you, I'll put our guest list up with any podcast in the entire world. Like, our guest list is top notch.
It absolutely is. So, yes, experts, all.
Experts, guys. And these guests are here to they want to share their stories, and we want to connect you with them. I think that's a big part of our mission, is to help connect you with people that share the same mission and core values as us. We may not do everything the same, but we all have the same core values and mission overall. And so it's about connecting our communities across the country. So that is our guest interview, and then the final episode you'll hear is that Friday Fire Fact, maybe Saturday sermon. And that's usually 10 to 20 minutes of me talking about a little something outside of the training realm, maybe a little more business motivation oriented. But every once in a while, we'll even throw in kind of a fourth episode ish. And it may just be an additional guest interview, or it may be, I brought one of my college athletes on to talk about the mentality of overcoming injuries. So, we may just kind of throw a surprise in there. And actually, last week, we released the Adarian Barr episode. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. He brought the fire like Adarian always does. And so I felt like, hey, it was appropriate to, make that a Friday Fire episode. So, that's how our show works. Guys, we do ask that you pay your dues and share the show. If you got value out of this, if you learned anything out of this, if we connected you with somebody that can help you, your family, your team, share the show, guys. That's all we ask. It's not that much to ask. It is a simple favor you can do for us to just subscribe, leave a review, just share the show. Post on social media. And if you post it, tag us so we know what's going on, because this is a mission. This is not just hey, we're doing this just for brand recognition. I don't give a shit about that. I care about helping people. So, tag us and let us know that you're sharing it so we can connect and help people. So that's the whole objective. That's how our show breaks down, and I think that's all housekeeping. So let's get to it. Today is Q&A. So what we got today, Chris?
All right, question number 1. This is a little bit more specific to a TENS unit, and that's where I'm going to have to modify our answers to this question. But in using a TENS unit in cooperation with an iso extreme, say a lunge or a push-up or whatever, the question is about pad placement. So So John, take that one away, because TENS unit and what systems you and I are familiar with are not one and the same.
Sure. So I can't speak on the TENS unit side of it. Here's what I can tell you. I'll give you the quick breakdown. The TENS unit versus something like the ARP or the Neubie, it's the difference between AC and DC based current. So AC current, like a TENS unit, is going to cause the muscle to contract. It's going to work on kind of a superficial nerve level. It will increase some blood flow, so that's a good thing. but we don't really want a muscle to contract because the contracted muscle can't really absorb force as much. So we want to lengthen muscle. That's where the ARP and the Neubie are quite a bit different. The DC current helps the muscle lengthen. Okay, has a number of other properties, but that's kind of the big difference for right now. So that actually allows us to go through movement, which is something you can't do with like a Russian stem or TENS unit. So that's kind of the difference between the two. As far as pad placement goes on a TENS unit, I have no idea. As far as the ARP or the Neubie, in a training standpoint, I think it's generally, I'd say in general, the muscle that you want to lengthen. That's where you should put the pads in general, but it can go a whole lot deeper than that, right, Chris?
Absolutely. So this is definitely going to be one of those things I'm going to put a video with to kind of show you again, once again, using the ARP or the Neubie, using DC,
Right.
not
DC current.
So so whoever asked this question, my apologies for not recognizing your name, but understand what you're asking and what John and I are familiar with are not necessarily equivalent. So, as John said, we're going to put on the muscle we're trying to lengthen, and you will notice the pad placement will be on the lengthening muscles. So, keep that.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
And that would be that's a general placement. So we're not going to speak for ARP or Neubie, but we both have a lot of experience with both. So I don't want to speak for them, but that's kind of what we would do. But now there are different scenarios here. So let's just I don't know. Let's use a bicep curl, for example. Just all right. Say you're training with the Neubie and you're gonna do a bicep curl, whether it's iso or regular, meathead curls, whatever. If you're utilizing it from like a strength standpoint, if you're using different frequencies, then pad placement can be a little bit different. And you could also do something like put it on the triceps, because if the Neubie is telling the tricep to lengthen, then bicep is going to have to contract harder. It has to, right?
Yes. And, if you have a Neubie or an ARP, or you have access to one, then try what John is saying. You don't even need any weight. Put it on your tricep and feel how hard your biceps have to work.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, absolutely. So like you could do something like that. You could do the opposite. If you want to do a bicep curl, you put it on the triceps and it'll make the biceps contract harder. You could also tweak the frequencies to get a little bit different stimulus. I'm not going to give that information out. That's something you need to go through Neubie or ARP to get. So don't ask me because I'm not going to tell you. Sorry. Because you can get different results on with different frequencies. So we may do like a hypertrophy or more of a strength in the bicep. And so that might be a little bit different pad placement, but typically it's proximal distal. I think in general is usually a good way to say it. But like, let's just use the lunge. The lunge is a good example. So let's talk about that one real quick. Let's say we're in an iso lunge. Our left leg is the rear leg. So when you do that, Chris, where would you say you put the pads most often?
A good place, since in a lunge, left leg in the back. It could be on the psoas. Okay. For the guys out there, you got to be a little careful if you're using sticky electrodes. Potentially, you got to be a little bit cautious on where on the psoas you put it. If it's way too high on the inside, you can shock yourself a little bit. But that said, I would say use the psoas, which is hot, way up on the inside of the thigh. You could put it on the quadricep, high on the quadricep near the other hip flexor muscles. You could get into the iliacus muscle, the long quadricep muscle. You could also put on the TFL, which is the most outside muscle. You could also put it in the middle of the quad. So anything that, if you can picture the back leg of a lunge, what is lengthening, what is getting longer, and that would not be a bad placement.
Yeah,
front,
that's good.
Probably the quad. Most cases. Could also be the glute.
Yeah.
Could be the glute. Think about it.
I was going to go there.
So again, think what's getting longer. So.
Yeah, so like you could look at it two different ways. I would, if we're not, I don't want to get too technical, but you could look at it from a perspective of what is it you're trying to accomplish as well. So I'll use this story. I had a client. I've worked with her, a long time, on and off, different things, but like her left hip actually it was her left glute. Okay, first off, your glutes always fire. If they don't fire, you couldn't stand up. So if somebody says your glutes don't fire, turn around and go find somebody else. Okay, your glutes fire. That doesn't necessarily mean that they fire in the proper order. So for this particular client, that glute and that hip extension pattern was not engaging like it should. Okay, so if I slip and say her glute wasn't firing, sorry, you understand where I'm
Yes.
coming from. Okay, the mechanism and the patterning was off. Now, so what we did was I actually loosened her hip up first. So I just put like black in the front, red in the back, just like literally front of psoas and then just kind of like in the lumbar spine, just to get the whole hip area. Did some hip circles, loosen the hip up just to get some mobility and range of motion. Then I did like black kind of at the psoas. And although I probably wouldn't recommend this just because I know this client really well, like I put it kind of in the middle of the quad, the red one, just to get kind of a full lengthening effect within the psoas and the hip flexor, because that my objective was to try to get the glute to engage more. And so what I ended up doing next was, while the pads were on the front there, on the back side, I put black and red with a whole different channel on the glute and told the glute to strengthen as hard as we could. So the front side was getting some lengthening impact. That was not my main objective. My main objective was to get the glute to engage harder. And so that was it. So you see, based on what your objective is, that plays a role in where you put them. Would you agree with that,
Yes,
Chris?
absolutely, absolutely, and that almost goes back to what you were saying earlier. Do you want to get more of a strengthening or hypertrophy effect? You could have that'd be the advantage of a newbie. Shout out to Garrett. You could
Yeah.
actually put two different frequencies at the exact same time, and use the
Yes.
glute on one frequency and a lengthening, more of a lengthening slash recovery frequency on the front. Sure, you could do things
Yes.
like that.
It's a beautiful
Yes,
feature.
yes.
Yep.
So those are things that, yes, you can do. But once again, I mean, whoever asked, and again, my apologies for not calling you out by name, but it you we just don't know about how you would use an AC device in training. Okay, so
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
talking with Mark Pro and those guys, they will even say it's purely for recovery. It is not for
Mhm.
training. So
Yeah. And we actually had Gary Reinl, who's associated with Mark Pro, on, but we didn't get into that very much. But when we released that episode, you're going
yeah,
to love that episode. He's
yeah,
awesome. But I do think we're going to reconnect, and we will, talk a little bit about the Mark Pro, because it is, I mean, it is a good unit from what you hear. It's very popular.
yes.
So,
But don't try to.
so there's some good things.
He will even tell you, don't.
Yeah.
It's not a
Yeah.
device.
Yeah. Not a training
Yes,
device. Yeah. The other thing I'll leave you with is, your motor points, but we'll save that for
yes,
another day. But no, that's a good question. Thanks for
yes.
asking. All right, question two. What is it, Chris?
Next, it has to do with feeling in an iso extreme lunge or an iso extreme. So the example he gave was in a lunge. So you're not supposed to feel the muscles, John. Talk to me about that.
So I imagine he's referring to Jay's podcast. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Awesome. So clarify the question here. Like, is he asking, are you supposed to feel it or not supposed to
Well,
feel it?
it's clearly along the lines of, is it true? I'm not supposed to feel this. I'm not supposed to feel this. Wait a minute. How can I not feel it in the muscle? How get So it's so. I mean, if you want to get the whole story, listen to the Jay Schroeder episode 7. Okay, it's
Yeah.
an awesome episode. But okay, he has to create. So Jay has to create these feelings in his mind when he was paralyzed, because he couldn't actually feel it in his through his body. Okay, so how in the world do you go about not feeling, say, an iso extreme lunge in your hip flexor? How do you not go about feeling an iso extreme lunge in your quad or your? How does that even happen?
Yeah. I'm just going to flat out say, I don't know. I don't have an answer for you, and I'm not going to pretend to have one. I mean, I can speak onto my experiences and my theory, but that does not represent Jay at all. I mean, this is just my personal experience. We talk about engaging the front hamstring, right? You got to be able to engage it and feel that. And, there's a lot of people that just can't even feel that. They don't even know how to engage the muscle the right way. But, maybe it's having the end vision of what it is you're trying to accomplish, and that being the primary modality, the primary sensation. So let's just say your goal is, your vision is to be the, first pick in the draft, right? And like you have visualized this moment, where you are when it happens, what you're wearing, the people there, you can see it, you can smell it, you can taste it, every detail about that moment. And so training will help prepare you for that moment, but in the training, that is the primary emphasis. You're not focused on feeling the muscle, it's feeling the end vision, if you're not supposed to feel anything at all, I guess.
No,
I don't know. Does that make sense?
it does. It does.
Because you hear about imagery all the time and visualization. I can't remember the book. God, Mandy just finished reading it. I don't remember, but I mean, it's been out there forever. But the practice of visualization has been around for a long time. And so when you really get into like the quantum physics and the metaphysical realm and all this stuff, that stuff is real. What you create in your head becomes reality. And so I feel, in my opinion, that is what you should be focusing on, that you have the primary understanding of how to do the movement, how to do an exercise. You know the theory behind it, but you're so focused. Don't be so focused on that. You should be focused on that visualization / feeling of what you're trying to accomplish and why you're accomplishing that. That's just my opinion.
Right. And so this is something that I have not discussed a whole lot of, but in my early years with Evo Sport, now keep in mind, I'm a long way from Phoenix, Arizona, so my first experience with it was before I got involved in any way, shape, or form with ARPWave. I had gone to the Evo Sport in Tallahassee, Florida. The Iso Extreme wall squats and the lunges were done with a box sitting on a polished concrete floor. Okay, so I want everyone to kind of picture this. If you were not pulling into position, guess what the box did?
It was probably sliding.
It slid. Yes. So the image I was given was you should be able to do an ISO extreme on a sheet of ice. Okay, I mean, you know what? That's a great visualization. If you're not pulling into position, if you're pulling into position, you could do it on a sheet of ice. Okay, got it. All right, and the and the box.
Or you could go watch Dan Fictor's video of him running on ice.
But so it's if you can picture that, I mean, I had the box slide out many times. So anyway, it's so yes, clearly there are muscles involved. There are clearly muscles involved. But once you get the right muscles engaged, yes, now the focus has to become on the image. Okay, what is it? What is your end, as Jay would say? Well, the end is going to be different for everybody. Everybody's got to create their own, and that's maybe that's hard. Maybe that's difficult. Maybe some people don't.
Absolutely. I think it is, especially in the society today. There's no question. But I think I'm not going to say that when people come into my facility, or I have a young athlete come into my facility, that is, I judge based on what I feel like I'm seeing with them. Okay, where are they? Biological age, chronological age. Is not feeling the exercise and feeling that in vision, is that like where you should be? I think so, but is that where everybody is right now? Like, is a 14-year-old girl coming in? Is she there yet? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Should she be? Probably. But is she there? Probably not. So, like, I can think of somebody in my facility who, like, I've had her doing these drills and she cannot feel it. She's extremely hypermobile, which just physically makes feeling a muscle hard because there's so much laxity in the ligament. So it's like, I have to do other things to get her to feel her hamstring. And so I may be wrong in this, but this is just my approach to it, is I will do some type of proprioceptive thing with her to get her to learn how to engage that hamstring. But then we continue that practice and she gets how to engage it. Then we take that next step. Okay, now you know what you're supposed to do. Forget about it now. Now don't even think about it. Now go to the next level. That's just my approach. That's not to say that's right, and that's not to speak on Jay at all by any means. So do not take that as me referring to Jay. Now, Jay, if you're listening to this, I would love to hear your feedback, man. I mean, just like we said in our interview, I'm happy to take the smoke, man. I want to learn. I want to know, and I'll dig and I'll research and I'll work. I will work. You know? So, hey, if there's any feedback, I would love to hear it. I don't know what I mean. You got anything else you add to that, Chris?
We all know Jay is not shy to critique something that is that.
Yeah, I know. I probably just set myself up there, but it's all good. I'm fine with it.
Mind being the whipping boy for means we're going to learn something. So certainly, hey, please hop in on that question. So yeah, I'm right there with you. It's in some cases it's hard to find. What is the end? Well, it's individual. So.
Yeah. And so we go from that realm to maybe the next realm of like, okay, when we talk about length of the exercise, all right, some people can do 5 minutes, some people can't. And, we were talking about this a minute ago, right before we jumped on. And theoretically, there's a point in time where if you continue to hold, you basically won't feel anything. Dr. J has spoken about this before.
Well, I have done an iso extreme lunge for 5 minutes. Okay, I've done it on both sides, 5 minutes. I've done push up 5 minutes. It. But one thing I will say, I can either really maximally pull into position. I mean, maximally pull into position where I'm giving it everything I've got, in which case I cannot do 5 minutes. All right. I'm just saying that right now. I cannot do 5 minutes. Now I can take one breath and get right back in, and I can go 5 minutes, but there's no telling how many times I'm going to fail during that 5 minute time span. I can also go a full 5 minutes and pull submaximally and kind of temper my pulling and really try to balance it out. And I can go 5 minutes. So I think there's actually some benefit to doing both, honestly. There's something about that balancing act, learning that balancing act, that on-off switch, as we've talked about in the past, in an iso extreme position. There's something about that, doing a full 5 minutes versus, say, the absolutely maximally pulling into position. Nobody, once again, kind of going back to what you said earlier, John, I'm not saying this is what anybody told us. I'm telling you what I've experienced. This is, I think they're both beneficial. I think they're, I will tell you that they both take discipline like nothing else. And I think that's one of the big benefits of iso extremes.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think with the maximally engaging the whole time, I mean, that's kind of a secret. Like, your energy systems are going to deplete unless you continue to, but if you train, then theoretically you can reach a point where the energy systems can recover themselves. But that's a whole other conversation. So it's like the stronger you get, the harder you pull, which means the faster you fatigue.
Yeah. Yes.
And so it's just like this cycle that never ends. But I think I've shared this story before, so if I'm repeating myself, sorry, but I don't know. We've got a lot of new listeners, so you may not have heard it. But I use my wife, Mandy, as a prime example. I mean, I trained her for a Navy nautical 12, and 12-mile, half marathon thing, whatever. And we did no running for that race whatsoever. All she did were iso lunges. Was she squeezing as hard as she could? No. But she was holding them for 7+ minutes at a time. I mean, to the point where we were doing them for like 15 minutes. Now, did she make 15 minutes straight? No. But it was the point of she actually mentally worked past the stage where things are burning so bad. And if you can mentally work through that, where again, you're focused on the end vision, that becomes the primary feeling. And she'll attest to that. She did it. And that was the best race of her life. You know, she set the best time in her entire, she used to run all the time. She didn't run quite as much anymore, but that was the best race she'd ever run. You know, and so, you know, I guess there's two sides of the coin a little bit.
Yes.
So, yeah, but yeah, I'm always open to learn and to, you know, get it right. So, you know, any feedback out there, I'm open to it. You know, if you have a different experience, or Jay, if you're listening to this, I would love to hear.
Please.
Because I want to communicate and pass things on the right way. So that's a good question, man. Whoever asked that, good stuff. You're getting into some deep stuff there, man.
Right.
So, yeah. All right, cool. I believe we have one more, right?
And that is, this person has done Evo, Jay Schroeder's system, but has also done level 1 of GOATA, our online version of GOATA. Okay. And he was asking about GOATifying an ISO extreme lunge. Well, first of all, John, since I'm not super familiar with GOATA. First of all, explain what he even means by, what does that even mean? GOATifying a lunge.
That's a great term. I like that. Well, I actually think this could be a really interesting question, because you and I have a little bit different beliefs and theories. Like, you know, your theory of foot and tripod and all that stuff. I think the core fist, the Darian Barton, like, I don't know if the two of them see similarly or not, so we can clarify that. But, you know, versus my type of theory on GOATA movement. And so GOATifying something. All right. Well, again, I'm going to say, like, yes, I'm a GOATA certified coach. I've gone through all their coursework. We've had Gary and Ricky on the show twice, or both of them have been on the show before. But I'm not going to speak for them. Okay. So, you know, if you have questions about that, talk to them. Okay. Don't take my word as religion here. This is just my opinion and my personal experience. So, you know, I think when you look at GOATA, it's a movement based system. Okay. It's a locomotion based system. And it is, when you GOATify something, if that's what you want to call it, it's understanding the different engines of the body and applying that, you know, when the time is appropriate. And so I've gotten a lot of questions about Brent Rooker right now. I mean, if you follow baseball, you know that Brent is just going off at the moment. And shout out to Brent, man. We love you. You've been on the show. We appreciate it. Brent worked with us this off season. He came to us actually from GOATA. That's how Brent and I met. You know, and I truly attest to, it was, you know, a lot of the GOATA work that helped us get there. And I think some of the combination of what we did. And so, like, let's use an iso lunge, for example. So once we reached a certain level in recode, so where things were moving the way we wanted them to move, we addressed the things that, you know, Gary and Ricky wanted us to address. We were making progress. Okay, well, then we got to get to the performance side of stuff a little bit, where there's got to be some speed work. There's got to be some power. There's got to be some of that. You know, that's where things became GOATified a little bit. So if we were doing an iso lunge or something, or maybe a Russian lunge or whatever, like, you know, I will have my athletes apply those principles to what they do. Now, is that what GOATA teaches? No. Talk to GOATA about that. This is how I implement it personally. So, like, let's use lunge. So back leg. Okay, what's the back leg doing in the lunge? All right. Well, the back leg in the lunge, if you're thinking about running, it's getting ready to recover, right? So we know that the cornering phase is happening or has happened. So I'm going to work on that cornering action in the lunge. Front leg. What are we doing front leg of the lunge? Well, we know the front leg is going to be establishing our bow. It's going to set the precedent to be able to absorb the energy to where we can eventually transfer it up through the hip, spinal, out through the shoulder engines, and reset. So I apply those same principles. Does that make any
No.
sense,
Paint
Chris?
the picture of the front. What's it doing?
Okay, so if we're going to do a regular iso lunge, I think it's pretty safe to say most people are going to, you should at least have the feet straight. Agreed?
Okay. Yes. Yes.
Would you agree with that? Okay. So I do the same way, but I may have it tweaked just a hair to where maybe we're overemphasizing just a little bit. So like maybe second toe is straight. Okay. Big toe's still pretty straight, but second toe's a little straight. And I just personally believe that by overemphasizing that, when it's time for competition, the body finds that happy medium. That's just my opinion. So when we have the foot set in the front leg, we got big toe, second toe straight, we got inside ankle bone high. So we're not in this like hyperpronated foot. If you got a flat foot, that's not, I'm sorry, I just don't believe that's a good thing. Like, I don't think we should have flat foot because it causes the inside ankle bone to drop, which creates this internal rotation, throughout the shin, throughout the femur, into the hip. And so it's like just focusing on a couple of these little minute little details to establish the structure the right way. Now, do I have their knee like driving way, way out to the if it's a left foot in front, like do I have their left knee driving way out to create this massive bow? No, I don't. But do I have it straight ahead? I don't know. It kind of depends on the person. Because we know that when you look at human movement, when you look at locomotion, the greatest athletes typically have about a 22.5-degree deviation-ish of the knee from the midline of the body, but it's not just the knee, it's kind of the whole hip down to the foot. All right? I've got all these. If you're watching this on video, you can see all the pictures on my wall behind me. You can see Barry Sanders right there. That's a beautiful shot of him. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see it. You can see the bow. So I just have my athletes focus on having that bow set. Does that answer the question a little bit more?
And I see your point. The only thing that I will tell you, and again, I'm not a GOATA person. So as far as when that's used, and when that you work on the hip external rotation, abduction, there's my very, very, very limited experience with seeing it, and that's exactly what it is. It's very limited, and that is if you work a lot on that abduction, external rotation, inside ankle bone high, if you will, the muscles that tend to engage in the hip is that TFL, which is a very weak hip flexor. It's not a very good one. It's a very weak one, and when it is the primary hip flexor, it will tend to lead to hip impingement. So, but this kind of goes back to what you said, John. Once someone is ready, once they've gone through the appropriate amount, you don't keep working on that necessarily. You don't want to keep taking that leg into external rotation, or abduction, whatever, working excessively on inside ankle bone high, because eventually it can lead to the opposite problem. If not,
I could see that, but I think where maybe the confusion resides is like I don't look at it as like external rotation and abduction per se. Like when I see it, when I break it down that way, that to me looks like a cadaver type of model. And a cadaver type of model bases something off, or the 3D plane, or the three planes of motion are based off cadaver models, which is not an accurate theory, because there are coupled motions with everything that we do. The spine moves in a coupled manner. So does the body, because we have all these different fascial segments. So like I don't see it as we are creating additional external rotation, in the femur, in the hip, as much as it's okay, we're actually loading the body in the manner in which it actually should load when you sprint or run. To a degree, I do think there's some give and take. I think, I think I don't know. Ricky or Gary said that at some point. I don't even remember, or maybe it was somebody else. But like, there's a little give and take. I think, and I think that's where some people get too hung up with stuff. Because will you inevitably like be in that position at a point in sport? Yeah, probably. But like, I'm not trying to actively get them to drive that front leg, that front knee out. I'm not doing that. So like, am I truly causing the TFL to become overactive and become the primary hip flexor there? No, because I'm still focused on the hamstring. Or go back to our previous question, we're not even focusing on that either. We're focusing on an in vision, right?
Yeah, and then, again, I mean,
You know?
when I say that, I'm referring purely to my exceptionally limited experience with that. So, the yeah, but it's also, like I said, an overengaged TFL. I'm not suggesting that's what GOATA trains people to do by any means. I'm saying that if you have an
No.
overengaged TFL, that is a big time cause of hip impingement. And so, just if all you do is see the picture, you're like, ouch. You see what I'm saying? So,
So let's go back to the foot
mhm.
for a second, like, because you're I don't want to say your beliefs are different, but like, you know, tell me what you feel the foot should be doing, because inevitably it starts with the foot and the ankle. So like when you're doing that, what you're a Darien Bar theory, Corpus theory, you know, whomever, gate guys, they were
Yeah,
awesome, by the way.
yeah,
Are they still around?
um,
Yeah, they were
so,
awesome. Like, what is your theory there and belief?
well, first of all, it's, as far as the way we train it, or what do you mean, position? I mean,
Yeah, sure, position or training or
yeah, I
both, I
mean,
guess.
you're gonna have an anchor point that's going to be, so if you're running, let's just use running as an example. For example, your anchor point's going to be base of the big toe, base of the little toe. So basically, the two parts of the tripod that you would say, when we used to talk tripod, base of the big toe, base of the little toe. That's going to be the anchor point that is ultimately, if you want to say, pushed off of. It's not really, it's not a massive push. It's really more of a spring, right? When someone's running, that's actually more of a spring because everything's preloaded. So you hit those anchor points, those two anchor points, okay, base of the big toe, base of the little toe. Everything's pre-tensed, foot's on the ground, bam. Okay, you got the spring position. Now, is it a little more complicated than that? Of course it is, but that's the part of the foot that's kind of driven off of, if you will. Should there be mobility in that ankle? Of course. I mean, you see sprinters with feet straight when they land. You see sprinters that run super fast and their feet are as everted as anything I've ever seen when they take off. It's
Sure.
you. I mean, you see all kinds of angles. Um, so that said, you know, the my theory: strong feet, strong ankles. You should be bouncy. You should have good, strong soleus muscles. Um, which we do with bent, a lot of bent knee type training. Um, so in that sense, I mean, I wouldn't say that I follow an Adarian Barr or Chris Corfus model per se, although I tend to like their stuff. But as far it needs to be strong, it needs to be springy, it needs to be able to absorb and then return the energy very quickly. So, you know, I will also say this: I have internal tibial torsion, so everything that GOATA would teach, I have done from the time I was an infant, just learning how to walk. So it's never been anything I've ever actually spent time coaching.
And that's a very good point right there, because you already had everything, but a lot of people these days
Yeah.
don't. Things
Oh
have
yeah,
changed.
we see a lot of people with
Mm-hmm.
whose ankles collapse, flat-footed, if you will, because they're they do have weak ankles, they have weak feet, they have weak everything, and as a result, that person definitely needs to be trained to strengthen and stiffen their ankles. And those people are usually very obvious because they do the opposite of what you're saying. Their ankle bone falls inward. Absolutely. So once again, this
Mm-hmm.
is not a knock by any means on GOATA or their system or whatever. It's identifying, who needs that help, who really needs that help, and then working with them appropriately to develop that. Um, I guess in that sense, I've never developed a model or followed a model of that. It's really more all individualized
Mm-hmm.
training in that regard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's a good point. I mean, I think the model can be applied with individual components. So it's like if I have, if I have somebody come to see me for a wellness appointment, like, one of the doctors we work with sent them out here to me, and we have to, I don't know, we're working on back or hip or something, I don't know, something like that. Like, I'm not worried about, I'm not going to be focusing on that type of stuff right there. Like, it's just okay, heel away and inside ankle bone high. I mean, well, maybe inside ankle bone high. I do feel like that's an important aspect. But, like, we're not going to be going into an extreme position right now. We're going to be working about just developing some awareness of what's going on, right? Okay, hey, look, when you're standing out, your feet are completely turned out. It's creating the ankle bone collapsing, and then it just goes up the chain. So, maybe we're just going to start with like an iso lunge, for example, just to develop some strength. And here's your pattern. We're just going to have foot straight, shin 90 degrees. You know what? Our thigh is going to be straight right now, because we just got to develop some type of awareness rather than taking it to a dynamic movement level. And I think that's the point. Like, there's a difference between walking and sprinting. Like, when you're sprinting, there's going to be more, it's more dynamic. There's going to be more movement there. So I think it applies to, it depends on who it applies to a little bit, but the theories are still the same. Now, if this lady was a sprinter, maybe we still start where we need to, depending on what she needs to do. But then eventually we get to the point where, okay, now we're doing more, whether it's, more iso or some other type of movement, and we're actually working on maybe loading that bow just a little bit more. So I think it just applies. It's not just, it applies to the individual specifically. And I think everybody just wants to take the information and make it some global universal law. And I don't believe that. I think there's a time and place for things.
Well,
and looking at how people move influences that.
And by the way, we're going to have Jen Perez from Gate Happens on the show in the not.
Yeah,
so
that's right. We're
excited to have her on, and we're really, this will be some great questions to ask her. What are your thoughts on this? How do you develop it? Because, let's face it, as coaches, especially as a speed coach who's kind of cut their teeth on speed like I have, it's really more along the lines of we've got to look at this whole thing as a system. That said, there are some very good ways to strengthen very specific weaknesses that an individual might have. And so I think that's going to be great to be some great questions to ask her. So, by the way, I mean, if you're listening to this one and you have questions for Dr. Jen, send them our way. We'll certainly ask them.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, guys, those were good questions. I appreciate y'all sending those in. I think it's going to wrap it up for us here. So, guys, if you enjoyed the show, you got value on it, please share the show. That's all we ask. So that's all we got for you today, guys. Appreciate y'all listening. Love you guys. We'll see y'all next time.